Hey guys, my name's Keon Hushman, and today we're going to be checking out how to replicate Periphery's guitar tone without having an Axe effects. Let's have a look. So for those of you that don't know me too well, I'm a very big Periphery fan. I've been following them for about 5 years now, and they've really inspired me in terms of songwriting and guitar tones and just everything like that. I think they're one of the most influential bands in the modern metal music scene of the 2010s, and I just love their tone. So much so that over the past couple of years, I've been really trying to replicate every single thing that they're doing and putting into their tone, from the amps that they choose to the cabinets to the picks to the DI boxes that they use, just everything, so that I can get a better understanding of how to shape my own guitar tone and really use that as kind of a foundation of what my ears like, because I really do like their tone. Just a little disclaimer, obviously everyone does not have the same gear at home. Things will be different. Certain colors will change between people's gear, whether it's their guitars or their picks or their pickups. But I think that following this guide will give you a pretty accurate representation of Periphery's guitar tone. So starting off with the pick, Periphery guys use Jazz 3s by Dunlop. This one's 1.14 millimeters. It might not be the exact same thickness that they use, but these are the only ones I could get my hands on, and they sound good. I cannot stress this enough that going from like general Tortex picks to Jazz 3s, you really get close to the strings, and it does change the way you attack the strings and stuff like that, which ultimately will affect your tone. So now moving on to the guitar, I'm lucky enough to have a Jackson Misha Mansour USA model, which do have his signature bare knuckle pickups in them. And obviously I'm pretty sure this is what they tracked with in the recording. So this does help a lot in getting that tone. But really any sort of guitar with high output pickups, it shouldn't really matter what woods you're using, because by the time you do everything to it, it will most likely sound the same anyway. And it's strung up with the exact same strings that the Periphery guys use. They use the Daria NYXLs. And the exact set on this one at the moment is 11 to 56. If I'm not mistaken, Misha said in a video interview that they do use 11 to 54 when tracking, and then they chuck a 56 on when they play live, because when you play live you pick harder because you're all excited and whatnot. But I naturally am a pretty hard picker, so I like to have that 56 on the top anyway. This set is pretty optimal for a 25.5 scale inch guitar in drop C, at least in my experience anyway. But when they do tune down to that low A for songs like Graveless and Preposition, which funny enough is a song that we're going to be looking at today, I'm pretty sure it'd be more favourable to chuck maybe like a 58 or 60 on there or something. But just for the purposes of today, it should be fine to have a 56 on there. And then this runs into a Radial JDI passive direct box. I had to get one of these because the input from this guitar and my playing was too hot for my Steinberg UR22 Mark II interface, even with the high Z input on and the gain turned all the way down. So I figured that the best fix would just be to get a DI box and hit that pad on the DI box so it brings down the level of my DI signal before feeding it into my interface. The Periphery guys do use the Radial JDI boxes. It was in their Periphery 3 documentary, if I'm not mistaken.
Bass, and even the synths, the analog synths are going through the DI here, so they're being captured. We got a Radial J48 for that.
While it might not be 100% accurate, pretty important step into judging a sound is to having a good treated room. Obviously this isn't the best room you've ever seen, it's kind of a bedroom slash studio, but I have gone into some effort into treating it acoustically, and pulling my desk away from the wall and having my monitors on stands and stuff like that, just to give my ears a better representation of what's happening. And of course they will all play a part into how I sculpted the tone, and rooms are going to be different from one another and stuff like that. That's just an important note to keep. And the monitors that are connected to my interface are KIK Rocket 5s. Obviously I do not have the monetary funds to have $2,000 set of monitors. It would be lovely, but for now we have to work with what we got, and this is what we got. Let's just jump right into all the plugins and stuff that I use to sculpt the tone. So I'll just give you a rundown of every track we got going on here. This drum track is the official drum track from the song Preposition from the Periphery 3 album stems, as well as these two rhythm guitars and the bass guitar. It's all official Periphery tracks from the album stems, and these two DIs here, they're hidden beneath each other, as well as these rhythms. These two DIs are recorded myself. Obviously they're not 100% as consistent as they could be, but it was just a quick track so we could compare. So to start, let's just listen to the actual Periphery tracks for what they are, and pretty much what you're hearing right now is how they would be on the album when you listen to it. So here we go. Alright, now let's swap those rhythm guitars from the actual album tracks to the DIs that I recorded, and let's give it a quick compare. So pretty close, if I was to say so myself. Obviously it's not going to be 100% right, but given the stuff that we had at our disposal, I think it's pretty good. So obviously the official Periphery tracks come pre-mastered, as opposed to this without being mastered. So the way I kind of combated that was I did the top-down mixing approach that Nolly does in his videos, and I kind of pretty much just got exactly what he would do from one of the videos when he was mixing, I think either on this album or the album before, and kind of just used that as a foundation before I even started making my tone, so I could kind of get an accurate representation of what it would sound like and how it would affect the overall tone before I even started. So the way Nolly does it is like there's two master faders. One of them is like the actual master fader, which everything feeds into, which at the moment what I've got from him is just a virtual tape machine and just a limiter kind of to bring everything up a little bit. And then before that there is an instrument bus that all the instruments get fed into, and just to combat that I've done a virtual mix rack with a bit of high boosting going on. These are pretty much the exact values that he did in the video in the masterclass, as well as the trimmer to bring everything down before chucking it into a compressor, and this is the exact compressor he used with these settings. I really should have labeled these before I started, but I guess I'll go through it quickly now. Tracks 3 and 4, 3 is hard panned left and 4 is hard panned right, and basically that's connected to my two DIs. So I've recorded the same thing twice, and 4 is my right track and 3 is my left track, and then I've just pushed those together. Same thing's happening with the Periphery tracks. One of them 7 and one of them is 8, and they both hard pan left and right. The reason why I've separated them is because obviously tracks 3 and 4, my own DIs, are subject to using amp sims and stuff like that, and I just don't want to mix that up with an already recorded guitar sound. But both 3 and 4 and 7 and 8 are feeding into the same guitar bus with all these plugins here that I'll get through in a little bit, and that's just to kind of keep it synonymous with each other. So first thing first, Fort and Nameless. This is the amp sim that I used to sculpt the tone. Reason being is that Periphery 3 did use a Friedman HBE variant on their Axe effects when recording Periphery 3, and in my eyes anyway, that's kind of just like a modded Marshall, which is essentially what this Fort and Nameless amp is. It's just a really hot-rodded, heavy modded Marshall. There may be some inconsistencies. For example, Misha did say that on some songs on the Periphery 3 record they didn't actually use an overdrive before the amp, but in this case I have chucked it on because at least for this song anyway, Preposition is a bit of a heavier song. It kind of cuts out the flub a bit and gives it that aggression that it needs. So starting on the first page of Fort and Nameless, obviously the gate is on pretty high, as well as this one, just to cut out any of that excess noise, as well as oversampling being turned on high. So we've got the gate on and the hex drive. The reason why I didn't use the grind is that the grind really sucks a lot of low end out of your tone, because it's obviously kind of meant for more like lower tunings and 7 strings and 8 strings and stuff like that, where Friedman HBE will kind of have that like low flub characteristic to it, which if you chuck the grind on in front of it, it will just suck it all out. So now to get really technical, even though I don't have an Axe Effects, there is a program called Axe Effects Reporter, which will basically open up Axe Effects presets and pretty much tell you every single thing that's dialed in. So even though I don't have an Axe Effects, I was able to download Misha's presets and open them up and kind of see like what amps he was using, what boost he was using, what level everything was set at, stuff like that. The settings for this pedal are pretty self-explanatory. I think a lot of modern metal techniques use this, but basically the drive is pretty much like all the way off, except it's just like pushed up a little bit to maybe like 0.5 or something. The level is kind of set between either 7 and 8. I figured here was a good level. And the tone is pretty subjective. Depending on the guitar you have and the pickups you have to adjust it accordingly. But at least for this setup, to get that Periphery 3 preposition sound, I did have the tone up here. If it's too stringy, you can pull the tone knob back a little bit and that will really clean up the high frequencies. But if you want your guitar to be a little bit more present, you just chuck that tone up, just like that. People that are familiar with Fort and Nameless will know that it is a very high gain plugin, and with high gain comes a lot of fizz and a lot of high end sizzle. So with that being said, I decided to dial down the presence all the way down and the treble all the way down. They literally cannot go any more lower. And the reason being is that when comparing my tracks to the actual Periphery tracks, the Periphery tracks were a lot more rounded and had a lot more low end to it. And the high frequencies are really battling with that, so I decided to turn it off. Bass I've kept dead center in the middle, just because in my case, anything less it sounded too stringy, anything more it sounded too flubby. And obviously Periphery are pretty notorious for having a kind of honky guitar sound, but a very mid-articulate guitar sound. Let's put it that way. So I dumped mids all the way up pretty much. Obviously that will come to taste and your own guitar gear. To combat the flub, I did dial gain 2 just a little bit down on Fort and Nameless. And the gain 1, which is kind of like the more of the high-end sizzle gain, I kind of kept dead in the middle. Anything more and it gets too hot, anything less, and you don't really get that nice like overtone when you palm mute and stuff. So I figured that this was a good level to set it at. The reason why I'm not using a cab from Fort and Nameless is because Misha said either in an interview or a forum post that the actual IRs that they were using for this album were the Misha Mix 08 USA Bold Packs from the Cab Pack 13, which you can get from ML Sound Labs and load it up into Cab Lab 3. These IRs won't work with any IR loader. You actually have to have Cab Lab 3 because it is a fractal audio cab. And in between those two plugins, I do have an instance of an EQ running. I'm using Fab Filter, and I've just cut off some of the high-end frequencies just to get rid of that like digital amp sim fizzle, especially on Fort and Nameless because it is such a high gain plugin. You do get lots of that fizz. So then from there, these two guitar tracks are then sent to a guitar bus, which is here. Loaded up with these plugins, and these are the exact same plugins and settings that Nolly did use in a mixing masterclass, using the exact same song as a reference. Just to go through that quickly, we have Virtual Mix Rack and a little bit of 10k boost being added, just around like 2 dB worth. Again here, like around that 4.5k kind of range is being taken out, just a couple dB, 1.5 dB, just to kind of get that high end fizzle out as well. Here, that 250 hertz range where it's like really low and flubby and kind of has that like static low mid thing, doesn't really sound good. A lot of that's being taken out at nearly 3 dB, but it's pretty narrow. And then just another bit of EQ here around that like 600, 700 hertz range is being pushed up quite a little bit to get that kind of like mid-rangey, like honky kind of Periphery guitar sound. To get that mastered sound, as well as acting in conjunction with already like the instrument bus and the actual master bus, the guitar bus does have a lot of high-end stuff going on. As you can see here, about 1.8 has been added to around that like 5.9, just before 6k region, and just here a little bit more of a push around that 3.3k region, just to bring out the high end and the life of the guitars. Next step, just a multi-band compressor to kind of like clamp down on those palm mutes around that like 150 hertz region where it does get a little bit woofy. So basically this just acts every time there's like kind of like a palm mute or like a blooming kind of sound in the low end of the guitar, it will just cut it out, and that's just to keep everything consistent when you're mixing. So as you can tell, when I'm playing like the higher notes up on the fretboard, it doesn't really do anything, but as soon as I attack those low strings and get the palm mutes going, it does chunk out quite a bit. And then after that was just a simple low and high pass filter. These values might seem a bit extreme, but again, this was all the process into getting that sound from start to finish without going back and changing anything and ultimately stuffing myself up. So here we have a pass at about 80 hertz. The slope isn't too brick wally, it's pretty much like leading into it, same as on this side, and this is at 7.6. The next instance of EQ is very, very subjective because these are cuts that I made, that I judged on my own gear, my own guitar, my own playing style, stuff like that. So you wouldn't want to cut out these exact ranges because it might change with the pickups you're using or the way you're playing and stuff like that. But basically I was just hearing some annoying frequencies that I wanted to take out, and there's like a certain frequency that is in the master Periphery track that I wanted to push a little bit just so I could get a bit more real representation of what it actually sounds like. So just as an example, this is what I was hearing when I was mixing it out, and this is what it sounded like, and this is why I wanted to take it out. as well as a little boost here right at like 3K. I did notice that Nolly did use a plugin to boost that 3K region, but I didn't have that plugin, so I was just kind of mediating it between the virtual mix rack and just little instances here and there, and this is what it ended up sounding like. Last but not least is kind of just like a bit of reverb, just a tiny bit of reverb. Nolly did use this technique in his mixing video, and basically what he did was he got like a room plug-in sound and pretty much developed a room to kind of work in conjunction with the guitars, so it would sound like it was actually in a room and the amps were like reverberating off the walls and stuff like that to kind of give it like a real life kind of feel. And I basically tried to emulate that as best as I could with this plugin. So as you can tell, it's very subtle. The mix is only at like 3%. The decay is very small, but when you take it off, you do hear a difference. And like I said before, this guitar bus will then feed into the instrument bus, which is here, which then feeds into the actual master bus. And this is all taken from Nolly's mixing masterclass. So just to give it one more listen with all the backing tracks and stuff like that, I will play the short excerpt. I'll start off first with my own DIs, and then I'll stop it, and then I'll play it with the Periphery DIs, and then I'll stop it, and then I'll do a 1-by-1 comparison. And then for the actual Periphery guitar tracks. And then now I'm just going to compare my tracks once more to the actual tracks, and I'll kind of switch between them so you guys can see the similarities between both of them. So starting off with my track. So yeah, hopefully you guys found this pretty insightful and use this to kind of sculpt your own tones or just copy this tone as the way it is. Obviously there will be some discrepancies between the gear that you're using and the gear that I've got, as well as like the room I'm mixing it in and all that stuff. It won't be 100% exactly how it sounds like here, just as it wasn't the same when I try to compare it to the actual Periphery tone. However, with that being said, I do think it's a pretty good representation of the Periphery 3 album tone. And I might do a cover of Preposition with this so you guys can really see the similarities between both of them. I don't know if I'll do that yet, but in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions on anything that you see or hear in this video, just shout me a comment down below. I'll answer it as soon as I can. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Ciao.